Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. My name is Jordan. Today's episode was absolutely amazing. Today I got to chat to Amy over in Perth, or Western Australia, and she shared with us all of the amazing things that she does to do with preserving and basically looking after all the produce that comes out of the garden, both to preserve it, make it shelf stable, different ways that you can process and preserve the food, and then also her love of food in general and her Italian heritage and bringing that into the kitchen, being able to give the produce that we've so valiantly grown for so long what it deserves and to provide beautiful food for her friends and her family. And now she shares that. She shares it in workshops and lessons. So I highly suggest, if not now already, but after this conversation, go and follow Amy and check out what she has to do. Dive straight in. I think you'll find plenty that you'll love. So yeah, let's jump straight into the conversation. Here is Amy, or My Nonna Life.
Several years ago, my husband and I purchased a 25-acre property. And on that property, there
So,
was a 1,000 square meter orchard with around 35, 40 established fruit trees. Now, when we
wow.
moved to this property, I would not have even said that I had a green thumb whatsoever. So, very quickly, I had to learn, I guess, how to look after these trees and care for these trees, because we had a real respect for the work that had been done. These trees were sort of 10 to 15 years old.
Yeah.
And I still remember we had just moved in, and literally within 3, 4 days, the apricot tree was totally ripe, almost overripe, needed to be picked. It was Christmas time. It was this 40-degree day, and we picked like something like 100 kilos of apricots. And it was this really like fascinating thing for me to pick all these apricots. And we popped them all into around like 60-litre tubs and sort of put them aside into sort of a cool spot in the kitchen, because it was Christmas and we were busy. And I thought, oh, I'll do something with those later. Now, very quickly, I had 60-litre tubs of like fermented apricot
Yeah.
slop. So I learned very quickly that that's not what you do with bulk amounts of fruits. That was the very first like foray into the world of, I'm going to need to learn what to do with this fruit.
Yeah.
And it kind of started from there. So the 35, 40 trees swelled to around 80 fruit trees over the 6 years
Wow.
that we were at that property. And then we also established around 50 square meters of raised vegetable garden beds for more of like the annual crops.
That's awesome. Are those,
And
sorry to jump in. Are those
no,
trees,
go for it.
all of those trees, are they established now? Like all of those 80 are they producing fruit, or are they still waiting on a few to get there?
Yeah, so what happened with the ones that we added in, obviously after we had moved in, we did spend good money to buy sort of older trees that were a little bit
Cool.
more established.
Yeah,
However,
cool.
we
That's
didn't
hard.
really get a lot, because we were working with the soil type was rock.
Right.
And very, very hard to grow in. So we actually we don't live on this property anymore. We were there for about 6 years. So the time we left, I think we'd had the nectarine produce some fruit, and I think we got our very first avocado the day we moved,
Yeah, wow.
out of the 4 trees we planted. So unfortunately, didn't get a lot from the newer trees that we popped
Well,
in. But the
that was my thought, because like
yeah,
looking for property, having the blessing of established fruit trees is just,
unbelievable.
it's amazing. And like that's something that's actually on my list for
It's
looking at properties. It's just like I want something, if
there's
possible.
something to be said for it, because it's hard to purchase a tree that's that established, and then obviously transplanting that and putting it into the ground. It may not always come off, and they can be
Yes.
quite expensive. So we did feel very blessed to have stone fruit, pears, apples, citrus grove, nut trees, like figs, you
Wow.
name it. We had so much beautiful fruit, and it was a real joy understanding the seasons and comparing year to year in the time that we were there. So I guess that was my first foray into learning to preserve, because very quickly, so my husband and I, we did a permaculture design certificate
Awesome.
together whilst we were living at that property, because we wanted to learn how to work with
Yeah,
the land, and how to water was a big issue there. So we wanted to learn how to harness that, how to grow more productively and working with nature rather than against it. And one of the things that I implemented as part of my practices was I kept a garden diary. And there was one year where, so every single harvest, whether it was vegetables or fruit that made it into the house, I recorded and I weighed everything, because I wanted to keep
wow,
track of
cool.
things. And I kept some notes about, pest issues that we were having, and wildlife and weather and rain, that sort of thing. And that first year of keeping that diary, half a ton of fruit and vegetables made it onto my kitchen bench. And
Wow.
that doesn't include what I gave away. That doesn't
Yeah,
include what, the birds or pests
yeah,
got
all
to
those
first, or
other
what we
ones.
ate. That's just what
Goodness
made it in.
me.
It's a huge volume of food, and we're a family of two people. You can't possibly eat that much. As much as, fresh is best, you can't consume that much. And that was what my big driver was, to learn to preserve
That's
food,
cool.
was
Yeah,
to, yeah, treat it in a way that I could then make that produce last outside of the seasons.
that's really cool. And then, like, as you say, coming to learn about basic ways that we used to all have this knowledge back generations ago, how to preserve food when there were no refrigerators and all of
Yeah.
this cushy technology that we have come
Yep.
to so easily depend on. So, why don't you go into us like for us a little bit, a couple of these techniques of preserving that
Mm-hmm.
you like and use regularly. There's
Yep.
plenty behind you for those who are seeing the
Just a
video.
couple.
Yeah, which is just absolutely gorgeous. So can you just run us through a couple of the ones that are your favorites, or what you started with to get into
Sure.
it? And yeah, see, because I'm starting my journey on this, and I'm one of the people
Oh,
keen to learn.
it's a rabbit hole. Once you make that first pot of jam, that's it. You're addicted. So I guess when it comes to preserving food, you've got techniques of preserving, but then they are different to, I guess, methods of food preservation.
Yeah.
So, for example, some ways that we can preserve. The idea of preserving food is to make it last longer, whether that's longer in the refrigerator or if that's longer on the shelf. So some of the ways that we can preserve food to make it last, first and foremost, which a lot of people don't always think about, but freezing food, first and foremost, is a
Yeah.
very, very easy, very economical way to make the most of any like harvest gluts that you have. And there's a few tips and tricks to, freeze your food better to last longer, but that's a very easy way to start to make sure that you're minimizing that food waste. Dehydrating is another way of preserving
Mm,
food. So that's a method of removing moisture. So whether you use, you can go with a solar dehydrating approach and harness the power of the sun. You can use a, commercial dehydrator. You can use the oven. Dehydrator is really easy to pick up, and that works by removing the moisture from the food, which stops any spoilage happening. So that is really easy to do. It works for vegetables, it works for fruit, it works for herbs. You can dehydrate meat as well. Fermenting is another method of preserving food. So, unlike other, I guess, methods where we are wanting to remove anything that could cause spoilage, when we're fermenting food, we're actually creating an environment where the good bacteria actually thrives and it takes over and it naturally consumes the bad bacteria that cause spoilage. And in doing so, it changes the makeup and, the flavor and the taste of the food that you're fermenting as well. There's so many fermented products. You've got, yogurt, wine's fermented, vinegars are fermented, your sauerkrauts, your kimchi, like the fermented vegetables. So that's another really easy method of preserving food and making it last longer, or doing something different with it. You've then got pressure canning as another method of preserving food. So this one's really suitable if you are, I guess, harvesting gluts and gluts of, vegetables or low acid items, and you don't want to pop them in the freezer, but you'd like to make them shelf stable. So pressure canning is the only safe method in which you can do this for low acid items. So you do need a pressure canner to do that, but it's a great way to keep food on your shelf like this, especially if they're low acid. So you don't want to pickle it as such, or you don't want to make jam, but you might just want to have, some tin beans or tin potatoes or whatever it might be, and you want to pop them on the shelf to keep it out of your pantry or keep it out of
Hmm.
your freezer. So pressure canning is another method. But then another method of preserving food, which is I guess it's similar to the one I used. So water bathing your items. That involves, so that's suitable for high acid products. So if you're making jams, jellies, marmalades, pickles, chutneys, sauces,
Yes.
what else? Juice, cordials, anything along those lines. But then you want to make that shelf stable. We process these items by water bathing them. So that involves
Right.
taking that filled jar of food, similar to
Hmm.
what I've got here on the shelf, and then placing it in a water bath where it's heated for a certain amount of time, depending on the jar volume. And then it's left to, I guess, cool down. It forms a vacuum seal. It removes that oxygen and that air pocket that's trapped in the jar, and then that makes that shelf stable for up to several years. So that
Cool.
is a very quick thing that we can do to any of our high acid type preserves to render it shelf stable. But then the method I use, I would say 90% of the time, and what I've done to preserve everything that you can see behind me, is similar to water bathing, but it's unique to actually Australia, and it's the
Oh.
Fowler's Vacola method. Not sure
Ah,
if you've heard of
no.
it. So it was introduced to Australia in around 1915 by a man named Joseph Vacola, and essentially it is a bottling unit. So he brought it with him from the UK, and it was, I guess, a way that the women in this time were able to preserve food to make it last longer, because exactly what you said, there weren't refrigerators, there weren't other fancy methods of doing so. And you're also talking a time where there was Russians, wars,
Yes.
food shortages. So
Hmm.
when they happened to be able to acquire fruit or vegetables, whatever it might have been, um, in season and at a cost-effective price, they wanted to, I guess, make the most of that. So the Vicola bottling unit was a way that people could, I guess, pop their food into jars, follow the system, pop them into this unit and process them. So they used to be stovetop over gas. You've got electric units available now. Vallis too has embraced modern technology,
Yes.
but the methodology is still the same. So the process is very similar to water bathing, but varies in a few different ways. So when we're water bathing products, we're boiling them. We're boiling them for a certain amount of time. The Fowler's method never actually boils the contents, but it does so more slowly. So it's a lot gentler on preserves like whole fruits.
Right.
So it never boils. You're also working, when you're water bathing products, you're also typically dealing with like very hot sterilized jars and very hot contents. And then when you're pouring hot things and we're dealing with hot water and boiling and all sorts of things. So it can be quite, I guess, a risky one, especially say like if you've got like little kids in the kitchen and trying to
Yes.
keep
Yeah.
little hands away from hot things. Scalding yourself can be like a very real concern. So the
Okay.
Fowler's method, we do everything at room temperature.
Wow.
So you wash your jars and you have clean jars, but you don't sterilize them as such. So they're
Hmm.
cool to handle. You'll make, say, whatever it might be, your pickle, your brine, your sauce, your chutney. We bring that to room temperature. Then we fill our jars and we process
Right.
them, put them into the unit with cold water, and it is a bit more set and forget. So the unit I have in particular is called the simple preserving unit. So everything, regardless what it is processed for 60 minutes. So it's very much a set and forget. So I can pop all my jars in there and they can be all sorts of contents, all sorts of sizes. I can cram them all in, switch on the power, and then leave it for 60 minutes. So it's a very
Wow.
easy set and forget. I can go do whatever. I can come back to it. Once the 60 minutes is up, you then drain the hot water over a sink, leave the jars for 5 minutes, and then just use like a jar lifter and pop them out to form that vacuum seal. So it works the same way as water bathing in that it's a vacuum seal that preserves the contents, but it's much more hands off. Whereas water bathing, you need to keep a constant eye to make sure it doesn't boil over and it's not, and it's always how long does this jar need to be processed for, and what have I filled it with, and how long does that need, and is this jar 500 mils or 600 mils, and because all of this varies as to like how long you process things for. So I think as a beginner, which is what I was, the Fowler's Vacola method is one that I started using, and not because I knew anything about it, but the previous homeowner had left her unit behind
Wow.
because she was the one who had planted all the trees, and she had been doing this for her fruit, and where she was going she had no need for it, and she said, would you like this, you might use it. She left me a basket, which I still have, and this Fowler's Vacola unit. I was like, yeah, sure, with 30 odd bottles. And it was, yeah, once I think I got that first crop, and I think it was cherries actually, was the first thing I ever bottled, and kilos and kilos of cherries off the tree. And I thought, maybe I'll go fetch that unit out and have a read of that book and see what's involved. It can't be that
Yeah,
hard.
yeah.
And it wasn't. It was not that hard. I followed the instructions. I bottled it, and I remember thinking that this jar of cherries was like, the best thing I'd ever made.
Oh yeah.
And that was it. And I think I must have preserved like thousands of jars of food since
I can
then.
imagine I can imagine by looking
I've
at like
still got some
your
of them here
Instagram.
because this is the thing, right? When you follow food preserving methods accurately and safely, it renders things shelf stable for a very, very long time. So with fruit, whilst peak nutrition and flavor and texture might be within that first 12 months, it's still safe to consume after that as well. And the idea is not necessarily to stockpile food, but it's more so to just like capture the essence of the flavor and the seasonality and enjoy it when it's not in season, so you don't, you're not going to the supermarket and buying things
Mm.
when they're not in season and they're imported from Mexico or wherever it might
Yes.
be. So that, I guess, is the fundamental reason behind it, is just to make the most of what it is you might be growing or purchasing whilst it's in season.
Yeah,
Capture its flavor and then pop it on the shelf to enjoy later.
you're right. It's the essence of that food. I absolutely love it. And thank you for your little bit of history on that as well and all
Yeah,
that stuff. It seems like a little kind of twist of fate having that the beautiful trees and the machine all there ready for you, the unit, and it's just kind of like it was just ready for you to run with. And
I know,
it's
I
so
know.
cool.
I'd never dabbled in it before whatsoever, and then found myself like I said, in
Just
a
loving it.
situation where I very quickly just had to learn and pivot because that's where I found
Yeah.
myself.
Well, actually, so much of that I would love to dive into, but
Sure.
a few, let's go back to a few of the preservation techniques, the different ones that
Yeah.
you went through. So, um, initially, like the first ones that stuck out to me were things like pickling stuff and your
Hmm.
jams, chutney, sauces, all of
Yeah.
that kind of thing, because they are relatively common foods that we might encounter.
Sure.
Also, like dehydrating, do a bit of that myself for dog treats and things like this. And obviously, freezing, as you mentioned, is a really, really good one.
Yeah.
Um, I think I tend to lean towards the ones that can be on the shelf that don't
Yeah.
require power, I suppose, because
100%.
if you're in a position, especially if you're in property that's maybe slightly off grid or things like this, often you might lose power. And in our climate, I'm not sure what it's like for you over on that side
Hot.
of Australia, but right now it's very warm for us. So
Yeah.
yeah, it can spoil very easily. So I'm leaning more in towards having things shelf stable, and all
Sure.
of those things that you were talking about were super interesting about how to try
Hmm.
and make it shelf stable.
Yeah.
So, like in terms of say, like let's talk about with your pickling and things like this.
Hmm.
So I tried the first time I tried making a pickled red cabbage. It was so I think I just allowed too much oxygen in there. I
Sure.
wasn't doing the proper how you can let the gas out through you'll have to explain this for more people. But anyway,
Okay. Yep.
yeah, there was too much oxygen in it, and it was actually just going off and fermenting like in the wrong way. So I was not fermenting it the right way, and it said, "Oh, try it every single day and like just see if it tastes right." And it
Okay.
was probably going to make me sick. But I need to practice all of this kind of stuff. So say someone wants to make something like a kimchi or a pickled cabbage or something like that.
Hmm.
give me your basic start to finish of what you do with your bumper crop of cabbage.
Yeah, yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, just want you to not feel bad because mistakes happen to everyone, and I can't tell you how many jars of accidental fermented fruit I have put on the shelf. So
Yes.
mistakes happen to everybody, so don't stress too much. So secondly, firstly, we need to establish, are you wanting to make pickled cabbage or do you want to ferment your cabbage? Because they're actually two different
Well,
processes.
yes, they are. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
I'm just talking very generally.
sure.
I think the two things that I want to know is both of those things, I guess, pickling and
Yeah,
doing all sorts of kind of these types of jars
yeah,
and fermenting, but fermenting more so because that's kind of like a lot to do with the garden side of things that we do, feeding the
yeah,
soil. The ferments work really, really well in the garden. And there's something about ferments that seem to be healthy for us, like with kombucha and fermented foods seem to do really well for our gut health. And this is becoming quite a big thing for us in the modern world, is we're discovering that this is something we need to be worrying about. So you're seeing
yeah.
kombucha and everything and like all of these kind of whatever it might be, fermented foods being brought onto the market. So
Hmm.
run us through, yeah. First of all, let's jump back a few steps. Run us through your
Yeah,
little
of course.
simple recipe on like a ferment. So like a
Yeah,
fermented whatever you want to choose, because I'm quite
sure.
happy to take this recipe and run with it. And then also, yeah, then run into kind of maybe how do you tell whether you've accidentally fermented something wrong or you've all of this.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah, so you're right. Fermented foods really have become quite popular in the last little while. More and more people are aware of how food can heal us and how food can have a really positive effect, especially a lot of interest around like gut health and microbiomes and all that. And fermented foods has been shown to be something that can help us. So more and more people are wanting to eat more fermented foods. Now, I'm not sure if you've been into, say, like a natural food store, a health shop lately, and seen the price of what
Oh,
fermented foods actually cost.
yes.
So, for example, you might go and get like a jar of like a sauerkraut off the shelf from a natural food. So you'll get like a really little one, maybe like 500 grams or so, and it'll be something around the $16, $17 mark or something like that
Yes.
for like an organic sauerkraut. Whereas you can make liters and liters and liters for a couple of bucks, if that.
Isn't that
If when
amazing?
buying in, it really really is. And so it's great you asked me this because I actually ran a fermenting class for beginners just a couple of weeks ago,
That's
and
awesome.
we covered this. So for example, you've got a great crop of cabbage that you've grown. I love growing cabbage. I find it fascinating that something so big can grow from
Yeah.
like the smallest of seeds. So
Yeah.
I grew a lot of cabbage this year too. So I have been fermenting like crazy. So when it comes to we want to ferment cabbage, which is known as sauerkraut. Now, it is really important. Any type of cabbage can be fermented, so like green cabbage, red cabbage, wombok, whatever it might be. What we need to do to make sure we are fermenting rather than letting something decompose, it's a very fine line.
Yeah.
We all comes down to the right amount of salt for our cabbage because that is all it is involved. It's cabbage and it's salt. So what I would recommend you do first and foremost is so prepare your cabbage, slice that, take the heart out of it, the harder component, and slice that thinly into a bowl. Weigh your cabbage. So get the
Ah,
weight of your cabbage, and then you want to add enough salt that equates to at least 3% of the volume of your cabbage.
that's
That
where
is
I
the
can already tell that's where I went
That's
wrong.
where you've gone wrong. Yeah. And look, honestly, this is what makes or breaks it. So 2% is okay, but no more than really 3%. So I just run with 3%. You're going to add that to your cabbage and then just sit it aside. Let it, I guess, break down, at least 10 minutes. You can leave it up to an hour or so. And then what you want to do is you want to take your finely shredded cabbage, all salted, and you want to massage that. So
Yeah.
get your hands in there, working with your hands is very
It's
good for the
so
soul.
good. Yeah.
Get your hands in there, and what you want to do, I guess, is help massage that cabbage and help break it down. Now, the salt will help with that, and as you massage the cabbage, the cell walls will break down and release its own natural brine. Now, you want to keep doing this until you sort of pick up that cabbage and you've got this like sopping, dripping, wet brine
Cool.
coming out of it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's when you know you've taken it far enough. So if you're just, fermenting a smaller batch, maybe only a kilo cabbage, it won't take too long. If you are doing like a big, big vat of cabbage, maybe several kilos in a big bucket, it might be many hands make light work and everyone's
Hmm.
giving that a go, or you can use like a fermenting pounder or something as well to help you
Cool.
there. But once you've got that brine, what you then want to do is pack that into a clean, sterilized jar. You want to make sure that there is no air pockets and no oxygen in there, because we want to create an anaerobic environment for your ferment. So pack a little bit at a time, pound it down, a little bit at a time, pound it down, make sure that there's no air pockets in there. Now you want to sort of fill your jar up to say maybe about three quarters of the capacity, because you want to leave enough space in there to pop a weight on top. So that's
Ah.
something to help keep the cabbage submerged in its own brine. So what you do,
Ah.
take a leaf aside from your cabbage as well. At the start, it's called a follower. Pop that in on top and tuck your small bits of cabbage underneath it so you don't get any floaties. Tuck that in, and then you pop a weight on top. So you can buy fermenting weights, but anything heavy that keeps it in its own brine will do. You can use half a carrot, you can use an apple, whatever it might be. You can even use like a plastic bag with pie weights or anything along those lines.
Right.
Just you want to keep it submerged in its own brine. Then you want to pop a lid on top and let it do its magic. So what you would then do, so this is fermenting in a glass jar, which is super, super accessible to everybody. You want to store it somewhere out of, temperate, so not too warm, not too cold. It likes around 21 degrees and out of direct light. So don't pop it somewhere in the sun. So if you keep it in like a cupboard is best. Pop it on a saucer because it may bubble over and we don't want to make too much of a mess, but pop it on a plate, pop it aside, and then what you then want to do is come and check it daily and just give it a quick burp. So that is release the lid,
Yeah.
let the build up of that carbon dioxide out, and pop the lid straight back on. And the less you can fiddle with your cabbage, the better. So at least 14 days, but around 21. And about a kilo of cabbage will fit in about a 1 litre glass jar, as a bit of a
Hmm.
rule of thumb for you to try a few new things. And then at around 21 days, so you want to make sure that it's submerged in its own brine. If occasionally it looks like it's rising, you can give it another press down with like a clean implement of fermenting pounder, keep it under its own brine. So that's something that you could look to do. And
Cool.
then at around the 21-day mark, that should be suitably sour, but it should retain that really like vibrant flavor and crunch, and it should be that lactic acid, but be delicious and totally transformed. And at that point, that's when you can like remove your weight, you can pop it into the fridge for storage. And so that's a basic cabbage ferment.
That's awesome.
All comes down to salt, comes down to ratio, and I guess the way you treat it. You can add spices and herbs to it. So whether it's caraway, dill, fennel, whatever you might like. Around a teaspoon or so is normally enough for about a kilo of cabbage. You would add that in with the salt. If you want to ferment alongside other vegetables, so beetroot's commonly fermented, carrot, apples, totally fine. Again, though, it comes down to ratio. So you want to make sure that you're weighing your vegetables, and the cabbage component should be at least 75% of the total volume.
Yeah.
If you add too much of the other stuff, it's going to throw out the balance with the
Balance. Yeah.
sugars and not quite work the right way. But it's something that you can do really, really easily. Yes, you can buy fermenting crocks. I've got a couple. And they are a bit more like less like set and forget. But don't let that be a barrier to starting, because you can ferment in a glass jar with no problem whatsoever.
That's
Does the
cool.
trick.
Yeah, that's really, I think I can really
Where
pick
do you
out
think
now
you
where
went
I've,
wrong?
well, I think for starters, it was the salt. I definitely had too
Yep.
much salt. That was
Okay.
100%. I was using Celtic sea salt too. I don't know whether that makes a difference.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry, I forgot to mention you want non-iodized salt. So just a plain kosher salt. When you look at the packet, the only ingredient should be salt. No
right.
numbers whatsoever, just non-iodized salt. That's
Okay,
the one you're wanting.
perfect. No, that's good. And then I also know that I probably had too much oxygen exposure because I didn't have weight or keeping it underneath, there was probably little
Right.
floaties and bits of cabbage that
Yeah, yeah.
causing
Oh,
some
look, these are all
problems.
the
But
things. These are all the things you learn. I won't tell you how awful my first jar of sauerkraut was, but we learn from our mistakes too. So,
yeah, we do.
and as long as you've picked up on your mistake before you fed it to anyone, and that's the most important thing.
Exactly, exactly. Um, like often we find ourselves like not knowing when we're at the start where we've gone wrong. So like
Mm,
I was just finding out with my process, I didn't actually know really where I'd gone wrong
yep.
until you described it, and then I'm going, oh, this is exactly it. So how do you spot some of these errors, and what are some of like the more common things? I know obviously you mentioned the oxygen that we spoke about, and then
Yeah.
um, like salt and things like this, but
Yep.
across some of the main sort of preserving methods with the jars behind you, and any of your
Yeah.
process with this machine and the unit that you're using, what are the common pitfalls?
So, what I find that people talk about the most is things where obviously they've made some kind of jar of some type of acidic preserve, whether say be like a chutney, say something savory, or maybe like a jam. And what they've done is they've made it, they've popped it on the shelf, and they've gone to then open it, and there is a growth of some sort, white, green, black, smelly, not smelly, who knows what, but there is something has clearly gone wrong and they can't understand why. And what I have found it is linked back to more often than not when I ask is, did you process your jar for shelf storage? And they go, oh no, I just, I had my hot jar and I filled it with a hot sauce and I popped a lid on it and it made a pop and it was all good because that's how it's always been done, or that's how my grandmother used to do it. And this is the thing that I guess I struggle with because I give talks on like a beginner's guide to preserving. I've met a lot of people through this, and I especially find with some of the older generation is they've only been shown a certain way to do things, and that's the way they've always done it. But like with progress in anything, sometimes technology advances or food science or whatever it might be, we become more aware of maybe a safer way to do things for a better quality outcome.
Yeah,
So the methods they're using, and the method still a lot of people use, which is the hot product into a hot jar and a jar and like a pop a lid on and stick on the shelf. This is called open kettle canning or hot packing a jar, either. And what that does is we're not, because they haven't gone to the effort of water bathing it or using like the Fowler's Vacola method, which is what I do, and actually creating a guaranteed vacuum seal. It may be that it creates a false seal. There's too much oxygen, there's too much headspace, too much height. They haven't filled that jar enough, and things oxidize and they begin to ferment or go bad. And so by taking that, sometimes it's as little as 10 minutes to actually water bath the jar. By taking just that quick extra step, I mean, you've already got your pots and pans out and you're already making a big mess in your kitchen.
yeah,
By taking that extra step, just gives you that guarantee that you have brought the product to the right temperature to be rendered food safe, and that you've processed it for the right amount of time. Because then you can safely put that on the shelf knowing it's been processed. You can safely gift that to somebody else
yeah.
knowing that they're not going to open it and find a surprise.
That's such a
So
good
that
point.
is what I find has happened. Absolutely, because you go like, well, if you wouldn't eat it, would you give it to somebody else? So more often than not, that is what I find people have things have gone wrong because they actually haven't processed things. And whilst that method, look, I still use it myself, especially if I'm only making a single jar of something and maybe I can't be
Hmm.
bothered going to the effort of water bathing it or processing it. But what we do in that instance is that goes in the fridge
Yeah,
and we just don't pop it on the shelf. In the fridge, it'll be totally fine, no problem whatsoever. The issue is when we pop it on the shelf and maybe forget about it and come back to it later. I'm like, oh, that's that jam I made last year and it should be
yeah,
fine. And then we've opened it and it's spoiled.
yeah,
Because maybe the thing is, it's like you don't maintain the right temperature by sometimes just filling, a hot jar with a hot product. So that's why by taking that extra step to process it to make it shelf stable is really worth it. Like you mentioned before, you've got places where power issues, especially in summer, like where we used to live on our acreage, we often had days without power in summer. So thank goodness the bulk of my food was on the shelf and not in the freezer. I can't imagine wanting to sort of, put all my faith in and, relying on electricity when, you've gone to so much effort to grow beautiful produce. You want to make sure that you've given it the best chance of lasting. So yeah, so that's
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 cool.
probably the most common thing I see go
Yeah,
wrong, and it comes
that's
down
covers
to
it
not
because
processing.
it's like for me, I think you're right. It's kind of it comes from this naive sort of thinking that it's just food in a
Mm,
jar that you just make it, put it on the shelf. Um, so you're right. Like we really do need to have these considerations of what it is, but they are sort of ancient techniques that we're utilizing nature's power and all of the beautiful chemistry that goes on within these foods to create such
mm.
delicious and or preserve or whatever it may be you're
It's nothing
intending.
new. It's absolutely nothing new. You're right. People have been preserving food from caveman ages. They've
Yeah.
been finding ways to keep it to last longer. And I guess the beauty is that I think it is still very much relevant today, maybe probably more so than ever with just the cost of living. And so many more people are conscious of, like, wow, groceries really cost a lot. So if I'm going to buy groceries, I want to either, I want to make the most of it. And whilst obviously like fresh is always best, but then if we
Mm.
do happen to have an excess, or we do happen to come across something that is seasonal, and at a good price, maybe we want to make something with it that we can pop on the shelf and then save us, money down the track as well. So I think that, the traditional skill and art of preserving, it's still very valid. I think it's still very relevant today. I feel like it's having a little bit of a resurgence. People are conscious of their consumption, and more people more conscious about minimizing their food waste as well. So they want to learn what they can to make the most of their produce, and that's at its core what it's all about for me as
Yeah.
well. It's definitely, yeah, it's a traditional skill, but by applying the modern knowledge that we have now, it's very easy to do safely.
Yeah, and like your whole I guess your profile is based on your Nonna life. It's comes from that
Yeah,
kind of thing, right? Talk to me a little bit about that and then
yeah,
how then I want to kind of move into your love of cooking as well and like how that comes into
sure.
the Nonna thing as well. So do you
Yeah.
mind touching on that?
Of course, no. So I started my Instagram account, MyNonnaLife, in I think it was September 2021, and I guess I had always been really passionate about growing my own food. Um, with the experiences that I had living on the acreage, I was really passionate about preserving, and I was really passionate about like cooking and feeding people and people coming over, and I would like shove food in their face. And I guess alongside that, like I've always been like an old soul at heart, and a lot of people made fun of my little old lady hobbies, if you want to call them that. So yeah, always been an old soul. Even when I was, a 14, 15-year-old kid, I was always friends with the women who were 40 and 50. So I guess it was a bit of a play on, I guess, my little old lady hobbies, but also an homage to my own nonna. Who was a big influence. I guess maybe that I didn't realize it at the time, but now I look back and she's passed away now. But I think about my memories as a child and learning to cook and not wasting any food, and my nonna taught a lot of that to me. And I think all of us, whether we have like a nonna or a yaya or an auntie or some, we've all got that influential wise old woman in our maybe
Yes.
circle who we look to and aspire to, just who takes the time to do things slowly, do things from scratch. It's not a chore, it's not a bother to her. She does it because she feels it really has meaning for her, and is a way she shows love to her family. So I guess
Yeah.
that was sort of why I came up with the
That's
name.
so
It was
beautiful. That
sharing my
yeah.
Nonna life.
That's honestly that's very
It
beautiful.
was, if I could be like her.
It deeply connects with me as well because I have that in my life as well with my grandmother is very influential in that way and I just the way you phrased that was very beautiful. So um
Oh,
ha,
lovely.
yeah, it's I think that's something that we can all try and remember is like is that kind of attitude towards life,
Mm.
doing things slowly and just doing things because you want to, and because that's just it's just so it's such a beautiful thing to remember. So
Yeah, and
um
taking stock, because we all live busy lives, and I do too. I mean, I work, I have a husband, friends, family. I've got you know I like to go to the gym. I need to walk my dogs. Like
yeah,
I've got everything going on in my life that your typical family does. But then these things that a lot of people might say, oh, I don't have time for that. The thing is, I'm a firm believer in you make time for the things you care about. And this is something I care about, and this is something I'm truly passionate about. And some days I give it more time than others, and there are some weeks I give it more time than others. But I always try to just like stop and take stock where I can in doing these fundamental important things. Like,
yeah,
hey, just harvested all this stuff from the garden. Okay, I'm making a plan this week. I'm going to make this, this, and this. I'm going to preserve it this, and this way, and I'm going to freeze it, and I'm going to eat it, and just giving that produce the respect it deserves for both the time and nature's energy that's gone into growing it, to then sort of grow all this food to then go, oh, I don't feel like cabbage again tonight, and toss it. But what are you doing? So for
yeah,
me,
you're
that's
right.
where I guess it comes from. And look, and worst case, okay, if you're sick of eating it, you can't find any more ways to preserve it, and you can't freeze it. You don't need to throw it out. Composting, chickens,
Yeah,
worms, like there's still
give it
other
away.
ways that we
You're
can
right.
harness it and give it away, or just
Yeah,
treat it in a way that then can feed our soil again. So bit of
true.
a
Yes.
closed loop
No,
system. So
I
I'm a
love
big
that.
believer in that.
Yeah, that's a lot of that permaculture principle, isn't it? Um, let's
Yeah,
let's talk about, because you said give the produce what it deserves. So talk to
yeah,
me about how that then translates into the kitchen for you. So I know
yeah.
that you love cooking and you've put on these wicked pasta classes and workshops that my wife would love, because she's a big fan of Italian and pasta in particular. So, talk to me not
Awesome.
specifically about maybe pasta, but just kitchen in
Yeah,
general and your love of cooking
cooking.
and giving
Yeah.
produce that kind of thing. Just what's cooking like for you and your experience with it, and why is it a love for you?
So I think for me, being Italian and growing up with this big Italian extended family, all my core childhood memories all center around the family coming together and eating. Uh,
Yeah,
food brings everybody together, and I'm a big traveler, and I love travel. That's right up there with my love of
awesome.
everything else. And my husband and I have been to around 30 countries, and
Wow.
traveled full time for a while as well. So for me, like the food that we ate while we traveled was a huge thing for me. And when we sort of stopped traveling full time and I came back home, for me, cooking, and I love the challenge, like recreating the food memories that we'd
Yeah,
gotten from our travel. I think it's such a great way to connect with different cultural people and spaces and places and ingredients as well. So it's a lot of fun. It's great to experiment. And so I've always enjoyed cooking. And I guess when I then began growing my own food and then tasting the difference between store bought versus homegrown, and like I just mentioned, knowing the time and energy it took me to get that tiny seeds like that big
yeah,
cabbage.
yeah.
Well, I want to do this justice. So I have, I like to collect cookbooks, and I like to watch cooking shows. I like to read about cooking, and I wake up every morning thinking of what I'm going to eat that day.
That's
I'm a
so
big
cool.
foodie. And for me, I love to just like I love to learn new techniques. I mean, it's I do sometimes we'll eat the same thing, twice or a few nights in a
Yeah,
row, but then I like the challenge of learning to do something new, whether it's like,
yeah,
roasting cauliflowers whole or braising cabbage and slow cooking it and whatever it might be. I like to, yeah, I guess bring up food memories from travels. I love to try new techniques. I love feeding people. So every time I like have it's quite funny. I've gotten a bit of a reputation amongst my circle of friends when they say like, "Oh, to come for dinner." Like, "Oh, don't go to too much trouble." I'm like, I will,
yeah.
because for me, if I've got a chance to feed somebody, I'm going all out,
Yes.
and I'm putting together like this, beautiful cohesive menu with seasonal ingredients, whatever it might be, and then it's also an opportunity for me to try new things, because let's face it, I don't go to that much effort when I'm just cooking for myself. I
Yeah,
tend to keep it a
yeah.
bit more simple. But if I'm hosting or having friends over, I want to go all out. So
I love
I
it.
um I love to cook. I love to bake. I love to use my preserves in my cooking. So
Mm.
when I say plan, all right, what am I making this week? Because life's busy, and I do like to
Hmm.
make myself a bit of a plan. I will always look at what's in the garden, what's in the
Yes.
fridge that I haven't used, what's already in the pantry, what have I got on my shelf, and I
Yeah,
will build my menu for the week around that, because I want
clever.
to make the most of the produce that I've got, save some money. Gosh, people talk about, food bills. And not granted, like I said, we're only a family of two, but you might be lucky if I spend $200 in a fortnight, and that might be a lot of, I like to buy lots of organic and grass fed
Yeah.
meat as well to make better choices. And that normally tends to last me a month, with maybe another top up of
Wow.
maybe like $50 or $60 here and there for a few things. I don't actually spend a lot of money on food, because
Perfect.
I understand I'm lucky that I've got the opportunity to grow some food, but I also I've gone to a lot of effort previously. So I think by shopping your fridge and your pantry and your garden first, and any preserves you might have, it helps keep your costs down, but it also makes you inventive as
Yeah.
well, and a bit more clever with your cooking, to kind of think about, like, well, what things go together. And if I want a protein, and then I want something fresh, but then I want something sharp to break up the fats. And that's where things like, adding your krauts to your food,
Yeah.
adding chutneys, adding pickles, just add so much depth and flavor.
Yeah. Because it
I, I,
almost
I
it's
love
the
food. I can talk
it's
about it all
no,
day.
I'm loving it. This is great. I think what I was gonna say is that you're saying a lot how well, it's coming across to me at least that things are for your passions, like for myself as well, gardening and things like this. I find it comes very much down to two things. It's curiosity and creativity. So I'm always super curious about different things with my passion. I can never have enough curiosity about what happens
Mm,
if I do this, or what about this. And, like this, we could talk
see
about
which
things
way
for
it
hours.
goes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's curiosity as well. So you've mentioned a lot, you get to try new things and new challenges and things like that. So the other thing is like creativity. So then through necessity, maybe for saving money, or the fact of
Yeah.
what you've got in the fridge and these things that you talk about, you're having to plan your week and sort of going, what can I use and what can I do most efficiently and all of this. And that
Hmm.
then leads to creativity of what you could use
Yeah.
and all of that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
my my question then is, what does that sound like for you? Is there anything like with this passion that you have for all of the cooking and the
Mm.
ingredients and making it all work together, did it really come, because it seems to me that it's just a little bit more than necessity. Like it's not just from needing to, or it's very much from loving this, being curious about it,
Yeah.
wanting to be creative and letting all of these parts of you flourish in this kind of area. Does that kind of sound right?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's definitely, yeah, it's not just necessity, because when it comes down to it, our bodies don't need a whole lot to function. And a lot of people can get by on just, very basic, nutrition, right?
Yeah,
There's no need to be, as, adventurous as
I suppose. Yeah.
as what I would consider. And so, yeah, if you're talking about, it's definitely not a necessity. It's definitely a passion for food, and for good food, and the art, I think, that it is, and the love that goes into it. It's, I guess, it sort of it helps me, I feel like, connect with my heritage and my memories of, like, cooking with my nonna, and now, like,
Sure.
cooking with my mum too, and feeding my husband, who can't cook to save his life, and who always appreciates the beautiful meals that I put in
Of
front of him.
course.
So for me, yeah, it's definitely about passion. And then I guess I was making a lot of things, and people always, oh wow, you always make delicious food. I'm like, well, and I kind of just blew my mind. I'm like, well, is this not how people cook? And then I realized, maybe because I had that rich cultural, I guess, upbringing and relationship with food, it's very different to, say, a typical, stereotypical, maybe English heritage Australian family that just grew up on, like a meat and three veg type
Yes.
approach. And
Yes.
so therefore they've not been exposed to the variety that is
Yeah,
like
and it's
gorgeous food.
also,
And
yeah, the mindset, isn't it, of appreciating the food and having that,
yeah,
putting the love and the care and attention into the food.
mm,
And something that stuck out for me as well is that how you love to share it and you love to
yes,
see bring joy to other people with all of this, with your joy and your passion, and share that. And
yeah,
that's something that I
yeah.
tend to talk about a lot, is sharing stuff and community and things like that. And like, is that something that you found a lot of meaning and purpose in with this journey, sharing it to the community and starting these things?
Sure. Yes, I guess with like when I started my socials, it was to have a bit of an outlet for me to be able to share my growing adventures and my cooking in the kitchen and things I was preserving. And I guess initially, like with most social media, you sort of feel like you're just like posting into this big black hole of not really
Yes.
knowing what's out there, but just going, do you know what? I'm passionate about this and I want to share it. And I aim to either, with everything like that I post or share, inspire, educate, motivate, or inform. And that's what I try to accomplish, not to be like, look at me and look
Yeah,
how
yes.
great my latest baking is. It's not to be that, but I try to make sure there's a message with it. It's like, hey, I've learned this. I had this, and this in my fridge, and I didn't want it to go to waste. So I thought outside the box, and this is what I've done. Like I try to make sure that there is an underlying message to everything that I
Yes.
share. And I guess slowly and slowly it started to, I guess, connect with people, and they felt inspired and they've saved posts. And the last about 18 months since I started giving talks on preserving. So here in Perth, where I live, I started reaching out to like community gardens, and I was hosted by community spaces like that who had me out, and I was finally able to make not just like social media connections, but in person, real life
Mm.
connections as well, who then in turn have come along and sort of, followed me on whatever platform. And that has brought me so much more joy because then I have seen, some of the same faces at different talks or demonstrations I've done, or now they've come to a workshop and they follow me across because they find they like the way I present things. They like the way that I share stuff, not in a hoity-toity sort
Yeah,
of
no, no,
preaching
no.
way,
Yeah.
but just in a very like everyday person, just like you. But this is something I find joy and passion in, and this is how I carve out time for it, and I'd love to share it. And even if it's just one little thing, because I understand, gardening is not everybody's jam. Jam is not everybody's jam, but it might be that they take something in what I share and it sort of sows a little seed and it turns into something else. And I've had that happen with a lot of people multiple times and it's such a joy. So I guess yeah, that's sort of my main reason for sharing things and what I try to remember, you know, like I said, Instagram algorithms, I hate them. I sometimes feel like I am like posting into the abyss. But
Yes.
do you know what? It is I still think it's worth doing because as long as one person gets some value from that, then that's great.
That's
There's no,
that's
mission
absolutely
of
right.
mine is to post it. It's not about getting going viral or getting
Yeah.
thousands of likes for something. As long as it has struck a chord with someone and they're like, oh, look at me, I'm now trying what you tried on your stories. I was like, oh, good
Yeah.
for you. That's awesome. And I love getting into my DMs with followers and people and chatting about stuff like, oh, I made a kraut. Like, did I get this right? And I'm like, send me a photo. And like, I love talking
That's
food. I
so
love
cool.
talking preserving. And for me, I feel like I've just got this big wide friendship circle now of fellow, preservers and food
Yeah.
lovers, and it's been
That
really awesome.
Well, that translates a lot online, and that's a lot of the reason why I wanted to reach out and have you to chat to.
Awesome.
Yeah, because it, like, immediately, apart from the fact that it was beautifully aligned with my first attempt at trying to jump onto preserving, I think just the way that you're um sharing these techniques just for the love and the passion, it really
Yeah.
translates. So I think we can all kind of take something from this. And like, I highly suggest anybody who like listens to this to go and check out all of your stuff and really
Thank
deep
you.
dive, because not only like when I was, when I flicked through and I got stuck on your profile and was looking through all the different things, and you kind of get lost going, wow, like, look at this. Oh, wow, look at that. And like, I think, even like you said, when social media is such a like a difficult landscape. You know, it used to be just
Yeah.
kind of you'd sort of amass some followers and then post, and some of those followers might see it. But now, like, you only kind of see what you're interested in more so than who you're following. So you're actually now like, and this happened with me, is your content came up organically.
That's
And
awesome.
I don't follow anybody on my socials to try and
Yeah.
keep it clear, but
Yeah.
the it popped up organically, and most of the time these days it does pop up to mostly not your followers, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah. That's
um
cool.
yeah, so I saw it organically and I was like, wow, you know, hooked in. So um it may, like, if this is any consolation, it may feel like you are posting to the abyss, but I am here to say I'm the one person that was changed and inspired. So now
Oh, that's really cool. I was going to ask you how you came across the content, because it's always interesting to sort of see like where people sort of heard of you, and I find that as well. Like when I've done my workshops for the last couple of months, and I always ask in my feedback, you know, how did you hear? And most of the time, it's like they have come to something else I've done, and they've taken a real liking, or they've found like a, yeah, do you know what, I'm vibing you, and they come on and they follow, and then they want to support. And then I've had, you know, like to get those like repeat things or repeat customers, or I follow you, but then I also come, like that to me is like the biggest compliment like
Hmm.
I could get from someone, to actually say like, you know, I gel with you, I really like it, and I feel like, you know, we're friends. And to me, that's I'd like to think that that's how I come across. Very, you know, I'm authentic. Like what you see is what you get on social media. I'm like on there, you know, with no makeup and sweaty and doing stuff outside, and that's just it. That's how it is, and that's how I am. In real life, and if I met you on the street, I would be the exact same. So I like to think that I come across authentically, and I also don't hide, you know, my mistakes, or if things go wrong, I make sure I share that. And you know, we've all been there. We've all been beginners at some point in our journey, whether that's cooking, growing, or, you know, preserving. And we all start somewhere, and I'm all about no one's perfect, but it's all about like improvement. I'm always looking to do things better. If I can figure out a way to do things and then help someone to get there quicker without making the mistakes I did, then and I guess that's why I've started creating, you know, my workshops and my talks, is to try and remove that fear associated. And, you know, no one's got time to read, you know, the 20 books cover to cover like I have, and make the thousands of jars like I have. They just want to be shown how to do things. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll take all those learnings and I'm going to bring it down to those bare essentials. Like you follow this, you really can't go wrong. And I love that I've been able to do that, and do that in these workshop forums, and have people say like, yeah, it's clicked for me, and now I'm so much more confident by preserving. And that to me is music to my ears. It's really cool. So whether it's just on socials, or, you know, it leads to getting to have conversations like this, or whatever it might be, you don't know what's coming when you know you post stuff on social media. I mean, when I got the call from like the Better Homes and Gardens team earlier
Yeah.
this year, it was because Joe been following me on socials for years, and I had no idea.
Yeah, wow.
So like you just don't, and stalking me, like not just following me, but like stalking everything I did,
Yeah,
and wanted to meet me, and was coming to Perth and said, I'd love to, you know, can we make a story with Amy happen? And they did, and that was just like a crazy little
that's
thing that
wicked.
came out of just sharing my passion
Hmm.
on a little app, little social media app. So you never know what comes from these things, and that was really cool, because I thought, well, if, you know, someone like that and a platform like that with such a, big reputation, and who see and meet all sorts of incredible people, if they see that I'm offering something that's of value, well, that's
Yeah.
maybe I need to start believing in myself. And that was a good kick up the bum I needed to get my website up and my workshops happening, because I think I had always wanted to do what I'm doing now, but I was just scared,
So
I guess,
yeah,
like of putting
sometimes it
myself
does
out
need
there.
that. It is. It's scary, and sometimes you need that little bit of confirmation, and
Yeah.
it can come at the right time. And like, I think it's truly seems to be your calling. So
Thank
this
you.
this is
I
very
feel it.
cool. This is very, very cool. So
It
yeah.
is. It's very cool. My husband said to me just last week, you know, because I am working around the clock. Like I said, I work 4 days a week, and I am spending every spare minute in my content from my workshops and developing those. And he said, "We've never been so busy, but I have never seen you so driven and lit up in life." And that was really, really cool, because I thought, yeah, you know what, you're
That's
right. I'm so motivated to take this to wherever it may go, and just meet and help as many people as I can, and just inspire them to embrace their inner nonna, if you want to put it that way.
that's gorgeous. Props to your husband for giving you that motivation. But yeah. And there we have it. What a beautiful conversation. And I think, you know, my next few attempts at preserving are going to be a lot better thanks to Amy. I'm going to clip out some of these parts of the podcast and replay them when I'm in the kitchen, trying to make this stuff. So thank you again, Amy. As I've said before, check Amy out on her socials at MyNonnaLife. She's doing all things growing, well, cooking, preserving, all of these things. So thank you again for watching. Please, if you've got any further questions, throw them down in the comments. Please hit me up on socials. Throw some suggestions down for more people that you'd like to see in upcoming episodes. And until next time, thank you very much for watching and listening. We'll see you again very soon.